Hello and welcome back to Geordie Leather. Today we're going to cover the process of cross stitching. In the previous episode we looked at saddle stitching, which is the bulk of stitching done in leatherwork, but today and the next few episodes we're going to cover some of the lesser used stitches, but it's important to know them. So cross stitching is today's project, so let's head across the workbench and have a look. Okay, so cross stitching is used when you want to stitch two pieces of leather end to end like so. You'll notice two things. One, that the holes are slightly larger than normal and that they're spaced more widely apart. If you use a normal stitching chisel to create the holes for this cross stitch, it just wouldn't look right. The holes are too close together and you wouldn't see the crosses. It'd be very, very small crosses. You want a nice decorative cross, so therefore we space out the holes a wider distance apart. So I'm going to put these two pieces of leather in my stitching pony on its side, just to make it easier for the camera to see exactly what we're doing. So let me just line those up. So you put your two pieces together nice and snug, so the edges are butted up against each other, there's no gap, and that the holes are in alignment. So it's the same thread procedure as before. It's a 2-needle thread. As shown in the previous video, we've done that already, so I won't cover that again. So as I say, the cross stitch is a series of crosses, but we start off the cross stitch with a straight stitch across the end here, which helps to bind the end of the leather together and just makes it look a bit tidier. So we need to before we can start our crosses, we have to get both needles in the same orientation. So we put one needle down each hole and we just pull that through like so. So we got both needles going through the first hole in the same direction, and just spread those out so they've got the same length thread on each side. So as you can see, that's given us a straight stitch across those two first holes. But now we need to show the diagonals. We need to get each thread back to the face surface, the top surface. So in this case, this thread here, this thread has come down the first hole, so we want to take it up its opposite hole. So we'll bring that one up its opposite hole. Always keep checking your edges are snug and nice and tight, and keep tensioning the thread with each new movement. So this thread has gone down that hole, so it needs to come up the opposite hole. So we bring that up here. So that's the starting stitch in the cross stitch. So make sure everything's nice and snug. I've done it again, but okay, there we go. Make sure everything's nice and snug, nice and tight, and as you can see, we've got a straight stitch which starts us off, and both threads on the top surface or the outer surface. So we want to next do our diagonals, which we're going to take each thread across to form a cross. So we take the first needle and we want to take the thread diagonally opposite to the next hole. So that comes down this hole, like so. That forms the first half of the cross. The other needle goes down the opposite hole, and that forms the second part of the cross. So again, we just tension each thread as we stitch it. Make sure it's nice and snug, make sure your joint is nice and tight. So now both threads are on the underside again, so we have to get those threads back onto the surface or the outer face before we can do the next cross. So just take each thread and push it up its opposite hole. So hole there. So that side comes up this side, and this side comes up this side. Try and keep each thread tight as you push the needle through, because you don't want it to snag. That just causes a bit of a mess. So both threads pull through, check your alignment, apply some tension, and as you can see, that cross is nice, nudged snugly together. So we just repeat the process. Up this hole, down the diagonally opposite hole. That's our second cross. Up this hole and down the diagonally opposite hole. That's the second part of the cross stitch. So it's tension those two threads and we have another cross. So we need to bring the threads back up to the surface or the outer face. So if it's going down this hole, it has to come up the opposite hole. Oops. What have I done there? Put it through. I don't know why I've done that. Go back. Right, got the wrong thread. It's easily done. So doing things upside down for a camera isn't easy. So this one has to come up that one. Like so. And this one has to come up the opposite one. So let's do that. So you can see what's happening as we gradually move along. Tension each thread till it pops into place. We get nice crosses. That's why it's called a cross stitch, obviously. So opposite the diagonally opposite hole goes down. Opposite with the other needle goes down. And it's snagged up here. So again, keep that tension, keep your crosses nice and even. So the needles are on the wrong face, they need to come up their opposite hole. So this side needs to come up this side. And this side needs to come up that side. Again, both needles are now on the face side. Apply tension, make sure your joint's nice and snug, and repeat. Diagonally opposite, go down. Diagonally opposite, go down with that one. And we're nearly done. So we've got another cross, give it nice tension. So we're going to bring up this needle up the opposite hole. And we're going to bring this needle up the opposite hole again. So again, give it a nice tug. And you can see how that's really tightening that joint. Keep the pressure on there, that really tightens it up nicely. So one more diagonal. I'll move this out slightly so we can see it before we do our closing off stitch. So down the diagonally opposite that side, and down the diagonally opposite with that side. So that's our final cross. So again, give those a bit of a tug, and we want to just finish off by doing the same we did with the starting stitch. So the needle on this side, which is currently coming down that hole, needs to come up this hole, the opposite hole. And the other one needs to come up its opposite hole. So that gets both needles back on the same side again. Give it a final tension, and then just to finish off we're going to go opposite, straight across, bring each needle back down to the back or the other side, and same with that one. Bring that down. Okay, so just keep it nice and straight if you can before we apply tension, and there we have a completed cross stitch. So as you can see, it's quite decorative but also structurally quite strong. It's holding those two pieces together really nicely. So there we go, that is the cross stitch. So that's cross stitching. Hopefully you enjoyed that and you found it useful. In the next episode we're going to look at the box stitch, so please join me for that. If you can, please click the like button, and it would be really helpful if you could click the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it does help us to keep the lights on. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.